Alright guys, so it's been a while since we've done a video on anything. So welcome to the initial video in the Crest House of Pain, aka our home gym that we have put together this past year. That's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. I got to pick out all the little pieces that I wanted to put in here. Obviously stacking it with the prime equipment, which to me is the best on the market because I can manipulate things and take what I know about biomechanics and resistance profiles, strength profiles, et cetera, and make the best training atmosphere possible. Look at all the toys and the whistles that I want here. So it's a great place for me to come and train. Not that I still don't go to the gym occasionally, but it's nice having this right outside of your kitchen. So what we're going to train today, chest, shoulders, and triceps. Right now in this phase of training, what I'm doing, so I basically just ended a about 14-week dieting phase. You could call it a recomp or whatever. I actually was kind of doing somewhat of a mock prep. It had been 2 years since I had dieted in a caloric deficit at all. So I just want to diet down to see where my body was at, where the progressions I had made, improvements I had made, because I am, unless something goes wrong, I plan on stepping on stage next around springtime, give or take, around May-ish. No shows have been picked out exactly, but that's about the time frame I want to look to compete. So, finished dieting, 14 weeks, saw where my physique was, everything's primed and ready, and I'm going to push some growth over the next 4 or 5 months, get as much out of it as I can, go right back into a prep scenario, step on stage. So right now, this current phase of training, I'm primarily focusing on my delts and arms. They are the primary focus. And then everything else is kind of filling in the blanks, so to speak. Today, chest, shoulders, and triceps. Basically the training statements we're going through here, it's kind of like a combo here. So it's more sarcoplasmic hypertrophy based. And you can look at this in a sense that our first 2 movements for chest, and these are the only 2 movements that I'm doing for chest, is going to be the upper chest, clavicular chest press and fly. So we're going to be supersetting the 2 together, and I'm going to be focused more on you're going to look mid-lengthened position of the upper chest on the press, and then more of the short position on the fly. Now, let me turn this music down. Because of ending with the fly variation and overloading more of the short position, that is going to dictate what the stimulus is biased towards. Meaning that I'm obviously taxing the lengthened fibers here, mid-range lengthen. The short fibers have to do a lot more work, and it takes me more work to get to that short position because I've pre-fatigued the muscles here going into the short position. So the short position is obviously more metabolically demanding because it takes a greater rate of energy to get that fully shortened muscle. So it is more of a metabolic stress. So you can look at more sarcoplasmic type hypertrophy in this training phase. Obviously there's still some mechanical trauma and stuff going on, but it's just biased more towards sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. That being said too, I'm always about efficiency in the gym, right? So people's like, oh, that's all the exercises you're going to be doing, is just these 2 exercises? Yes. I get in, execute really well, take it to pure mechanical failure, and then I'm done. It's stimulating. I don't want to waste fuel. I don't want to waste energy on stuff just to do more stuff, okay? Same thing when we go into the triceps. If we're going to be doing a triple set for the triceps, a triple set for the medial delt, and it's basically one exercise, but I'm manipulating the profile of it for that movement. So basically, if you want to look at it, I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4 exercises today for chest, shoulders, and triceps, okay? Get in, execute well, train hard, get the hell out and recover, okay guys? It's not about more volume. Most of the time people have to do more jump volume because their execution is poor and or their effort is poor, or it's a combination of the 2. So guess what? If you have poor execution, less stimulation to the muscle fiber, the less you're going to get out of it, the less adaptations you're going to create. So guess you just got to do more shit to get more out of it. So that is where you have to watch that part of it, and people are just doing way too much, and if they just improve their execution and their effort, they would get by with a lot less. We want to get in, do what we need to do, get out and recover and grow, right? All right, so we're starting initially with the clavicular press and the clavicular fly. Now, people are like, well, they think the only thing you need to do to train upper chest is do it on an incline, right? So, doing it on an incline here, I'm having Nicole come over here, lay down on the bench. So how do we figure out how to basically hit those clavicular fibers, which, with the name upper chest, the clavicular fibers attached to the clavicle, right? So this is slightly different for everybody depending on their clavicle, their structure, personal structure. So when people do an incline press, what you typically will see is that they flare their elbows basically like 90 degrees from their torso, and then they just press. Number one, this is not good for shoulder health if you're flaring your elbows out like this, because you're not allowing the humerus to have enough room where it sits into the scapula and that kind of a fossa. You're basically limiting your range of motion and you're kind of jamming your joint here, okay? So number one, you should pretty much on any exercise, chest exercise, you should never flare your elbows out, all right? There's always going to be a slight adduction of the humerus to just give yourself more room to move and get more active range of motion, okay? Now, how do we figure out the upper fibers? So you're going to understand you have your upper fibers, the clavicular fibers, you have the mid chest, which is your sternal fibers, then you have the lower chest, which is your costal fibers. They each have their own direction of pull. The sternal is the biggest one, and the one that has the crossover a little bit between the costal and it overlaps a little bit with the clavicular, the upper chest. So the clavicular and the lower chest, their costal fibers, have the most distinct, different paths, so to speak, of their arm. So she lays back. The easiest way to find this is if you can literally see someone's clavicle and how it runs. The arm path is more of kind of a tucked position and then coming up in line with that clavicle, okay? So it's this kind of downward motion, getting this full stretch, and then basically the bicep, for the most part, going towards the neck, the top of or the base of the clavicle here, okay? So that is your arm path, and it's a little bit different for everybody, okay? So the same thing when we do the fly, and the easiest way to find your arm path is you can literally put your hands on your upper chest, it's right below the clavicle, and you can bring your arm across. And you can kind of just play with this, and you just see where it balls up the most. And when you can kind of feel that fully shortened pec up here, that's your arm path, okay? That's more this down and upward motion. Now there is some crossover a little bit between the anterior delt, because the anterior delt is more this position, so it's pretty close. So that's why you want to kind of find that optimal arm path. It's okay, there's a little overlap. You're not truly isolating just the clavicle portion of the pec, but we want to bias more towards that, right? So just feel it out. I mean, it's the simplest cue is just put your hand on the pec, come across, play around and see where that position it is. Right there's mine. So this is my arm path, right? It's this down and upward motion. So it's the same thing you want to mimic here. And you can honestly, she can go up here for the clavicle. She can go all the way down here. What this incline is going to do is bias more if it's going to be loaded more towards the mid-short position or the mid-lengthened position. The biggest thing that's going to dictate her upper fibers working is this arm path here, right? Don't flare, don't fully tuck. It's finding that nice little range, come up, and then press in, okay? All right, so now with the fly, the grip that I like for this, now I have the CAS handles here from Prime, but you don't have to have these, is a neutral grip, okay? Because if you're overly internally rotated, you're going to jam the joint, you're going to actually shut down the fibers, and people will sometimes do this kind of supinated underhand grip. You'll see them come up and across for the upper chest fibers, but that actually puts a lot more stress on the bicep, more so than the pecs. So I really like this more stable position of a neutral grip. And again, it's that same arm path. I like to have a slight bend in the elbow just for more stabilization at the elbow and shoulder joint. And then again, that's just coming up and across and fully shortening that pec, okay? down, come across, fully shorten that pec. And this is a movement, because the clavicular fibers are the smallest of the chest divisions, it's also typically going to be the weakest. So this is a movement that I recommend that your tempo be very controlled on. Doesn't mean you're purposely going really slow or anything, but it just needs to be controlled in those ranges. So you're optimizing, trying to keep most of the output and tension on those upper fibers and not letting it carry over and changing your mechanics to get to more sternal division of the pec, okay? So we're gonna hit this. What we're gonna do is we're gonna superset the two. We're gonna do it kind of like a heavy light. We're gonna do 8 reps on the incline press with the pause in the bottom position. Come to the fly, and we're gonna do 12 reps and a pause in that shortened position, okay? All right, guys, so one thing I want to talk about really quick about is scapular position when you're pressing and or when you're doing a fly. People, I'm seeing it more and more put on social media, is when you're doing any type of press to retract your scapula and keep it there the entire time you're pressing. If you just focus on retracting your scapula and you keep it there through the entire range of motion of a press, you actually are limiting your stability and you're creating joint dysfunction. Because think about your humerus sitting in that fossa in the scapula, right? If you're pinning the scapula down and you go to press and you're trying to move that humerus around the body, you're basically pulling that humerus out of that socket slightly and putting a lot of stress on those tendons and ligaments in your shoulder complex, okay? That scapula has to move around slightly with the humerus. They have to work with each other, okay? If you do not do that, if you don't allow for natural movement of the scapula, you're also going to inhibit the serratus, which is also something that stabilizes the shoulder joint on the opposing side. So you can't just retract and keep there. You're shortening your range of motion. You're creating instability. You're creating joint dysfunction, and you're not getting as much output out of the chest. So allow that scapula to move around naturally. You're not letting it fully protract or anything, but it has to move and come around slightly. You can't just keep it retracted, or you're gonna cause more issues and more shoulder problems if you do that. And I'm seeing it more and more and more, which is frustrating because people are just, for some reason, aren't understanding the mechanics and the function of how these things work together. You're not trying to keep one thing from, you're not trying to over-isolate, so to speak. Too much isolation creates inhibition, okay? So whether it's this, even on the fly, that scapula is gonna come around and it's gonna slightly protract just to keep the stability in the shoulder, and that serratus takes over in this plane and keeps stability. So stop overly retracting your scapula on presses. Let that shit move normally, or you're gonna cause issues down the road, trust me. All right, so now we're gonna move on to medial delt for the movements for the day. And this is basically manipulating one movement with different profiles, basically to kill all the sarcomeres in the muscle. So we're gonna do a triple set. So initially we're gonna do a Y raise, which is the only movement you can really fully shorten the medial delt in. And it also synergistically works with the lower trap for shoulder stability. So it's kind of an integrated movement, but it fully does shorten the medial delt. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna manipulate how we're standing near the cables, and then also the bench. So the Y raise, we're gonna start facing out, so facing out of the cables. The whole point of this being, when I pull this up into a Y position, basically everything's in line, and basically the cable is as close to my body as possible, meaning that it deloads a lot at the top. So this is where I'm gonna focus on a short position and needing roughly a 1 second contraction. After that, I'm gonna flip around. I'm away from the cable, so when I get in this top position here, you can see the cable is much further away from my torso, meaning it's more overloaded in the top position. So no pauses there, just continuing to work. And then the last thing I'm gonna do is a Y raise on the bench. So with this, obviously I'm only working against gravity and not against the cables. So this is basically working to an isometronic. An isometronic is basically where you're moving against something that's immovable. So you were doing a bench press pushing into a pin or something where you can't move. But you can still create that same stimulus by overloading a position to where you can't move, right? So when you use a dumbbell for the Y raise, once you get to a certain point, like it's extremely overloaded in this top position. Obviously because we're working against gravity. So I'm gonna use a weight that's heavy enough that only allows me to get maybe 3/4 to half the way up, and it's like hitting a wall. But once I hit that wall, I'm going to continue to contract as hard as I can for a couple of seconds, back down, back up, hit that wall, contract for 2 seconds. Basically just finishing off whatever fibers are left. So we're gonna just do 3 rounds of this, and then that's it for medial delt, and we'll move on to triceps.
I got such a good heart that I make a motherfucker wonder if he did. Damn right, and I do it again, 'cause I am right, so I got to break bread with the enemy. No matter how many cats I break bread with, I break who you sending me. You motherfuckers never wanted nothing but your life saved, bitch, and that's on a life day. I'm
thing for the day is we're going to do a triple set for the triceps. And again, it's kind of similar to what we just did for the delts, in that we're manipulating the resistance profile just by manipulating body positioning to overload more of the short position or the mid-lengthen position. So what we're going to do is a crossover press down, which in my opinion is one of the two best exercises you can do for triceps, just because it allows you to line things up really well, and it really allows you to engage the long head, which a lot of people don't do because they tend to do rope press downs or bar press downs, and that humerus is kind of internally rotated. So remember, the long head attaches to the scapula, so if you're getting in this position, that's going to be more optimal, a stable position I should say. It's more optimal for the long head, because if you're stable in this position, the long head's in a straight line and it's pulling on the scapula, so it actually has something to pull towards in that straight line. All right, so this next movement we're doing is a tricep. It's basically what we did for the Y raise, in the sense of we're going to manipulate body positioning to manipulate the resistance profile of the movement. To do this, we're going to start by overloading the short position, mid-lengthen, and then short position again to create an isometronic. So initially, to overload the short position in the crossover press down, you're going to be in a step back position. So as I am in the fully contracted position, the cable is further away from my arm, right? So after I've done this, I'm going to walk forward, and you can see how the cable is getting closer to my torso in this short position. So now the cable is furthest away from me in this mid-range lengthen type position, okay? I'll push out 8 reps here, and then I'll finish by stepping back again. And I'm going to be already so fatigued at this point that trying to go into the short position is going to create an isometronic. I'm basically going to hit that sticking point where I can't fully extend, but I'm going to continue to contract against that for a couple of seconds to finish things off, right? So it's just mechanical disadvantages and advantages by just moving your body position with the cable, and you don't have to change weights, you don't have to take your hands off the cables, you can just continue to work, obviously for an extended amount of time. I think this is one of the best tricep exercises because it lines up really well, obviously, through this natural arm path, as opposed to like a rope or a bar, to where it allows you to internally rotate to get in this contracted position, which disengages the long head, because the long head attaches to the scapula, and to get it to fully activate, it needs to be in a straight line with the scapula. If your arms are pulled around, obviously it's in a stretched position. So this is better lined up to get a fully shortened long head. So we're going to do 3 rounds of this, and then that's it for the day.
We shall never retreat till we get the glory. Never back down, they gon' hear the story. Oh, let them tell the story. Pass it down the generations, so you gon' keep our soul free. Never show mercy, ain't no soldier worthy. Can't no weapon hurt me, y'all gon' have to curse me. Marching with 1,000 feet, all my soldiers serve me. Ain't no weapon when we step in, no kiddies concern me. Oh, we will not retreat till we get the glory.
All right, so we're gonna talk about post-workout supplementation and or food, okay? So one of the things that I like post-training is to first and foremost make sure your body is in the best state possible to actually digest, break down, assimilate, absorb the nutrients you're putting in it, right? Because you got to understand when you're training, you put your body in that sympathetic state, the digestive functions, the immune system, everything's been kind of down-regulated, so to speak. Obviously, it's still working to an extent, but it's just not working at an optimal rate. So what I like for a lot of people to do is to either do some type of a parasympathetic like activity right after training, that be stretching and some deep breathing for 10 minutes after training, walking around a track, walking on the treadmill, whatever it may be, just to start calming the system back down and switch into recovery mode and get back into that parasympathetic state, that rest and digest state. And we do that, and then we optimize what we're getting ready to put in our body as far as replenishment of glycogen, your amino acids, and all that. Now, once that's accomplished, there's the hack that I like. If some people are overanalyzing like me and like a lot of data, a simple thing you can do is you can test your waking heart rate. You can see where that's at in the morning. Say it's like 60, right? And then after training, you would test your heart rate and wait till it's back around that number, like say 65 or so. And then it's like, okay, my body's back in that parasympathetic state. It's ready to, demolish some food and absorb all those nutrients back in my body and digest it efficiently. So once you've calmed down, now you're ready to replenish everything you just depleted, right? Even if you had the intra-workout shake, yes, your muscle glycogen levels and everything are still depleted, right? So we need to replenish that, start the recovery process. So what I like to do personally, the first thing that I like to do is take taurine. Taurine, I like anywhere from 2 to 3 grams. That's going to continue to help calm the nervous system, and it helps with glucose uptake. And then I like to take magnesium. I like this. This is a combination of malate and glycinate. Glycinate is the highest availability, so it's really bioavailable. It absorbs the quickest. And this supplement also has taurine in it as well, and B6, which helps with the absorption of magnesium. So I like to take this with the taurine right after I'm done training. After I've done that, then I like to make my little concoction up, right? So I want something that's digests easily and more of a, you could call simple carbohydrate. But that honestly would depend on your training goals. Like if you're in a fat loss phase, you might opt for something that is less insulinogenic, that doesn't really spike the insulin as high. So we could look towards, you could have something like oatmeal, you could have potato. But for most people, we're going to look for something that digests a lot faster. What I like, personally, is Rice and Grinds by Pride Foods. This is basically cream of rice in a sense, but in its purest form. Literally the only ingredient is granulated white rice. There's nothing else in it. Like if you see cream of rice, you're going to see it has added iron and whatnot in it. And I've just seen a difference in how it digests for me and most of my clients and friends. So this is one of my favorites, so to speak, on that. But another option is people like cereal. Cereal is awesome. You could be any low-fat cereal. That's also a time you can have your treat foods, right? Because it absorbs really quickly and you look for something to replenish muscle glycogen levels as quickly as possible. On top of that, I like the IsoFit from Nutrex. This is just a lactose-free whey isolate. High in amino acids, obviously, and digests really easy. Again, digestibility is a big factor immediately after training, and all the time for that matter. And then also everybody's favorite is creatine. Now, if you want to take this before a workout, that's fine as well. The biggest thing with this is just building it up in your system and getting your basically your cells saturated with it, your body saturated, and then just keeping a maintenance dose to around 5 grams a day, even on off days. But I mix this in as well, and then 2 scoops of glutamine for gut health, and also helps rid the body of ammonia, and for the nervous system. Now, I like to just mix all this stuff together, right? So I get my cream of rice, I dump in my whey isolate, I dump in my creatine, I dump in my glutamine, put it in a bowl, mix it up, eat it. Easy peasy. And it tastes really good. So that's just a really quick, simple way to replenish those glycogen levels. And again, make sure your body's just in a state that's ready to take these nutrients up. If you just had a hard ass training session and you're still just kind of wired and your heart rate's still elevated, don't think that I gotta have my meal in 10 minutes. That's ridiculous. You're not gonna go into a catabolic state in 10 minutes. So just make sure you're calming the body down, calm your system down, get the heart rate back down, then take your time, eat your post-workout meal, better assimilation, better absorption, better recovery, and then you're on your way to packing on more muscle tissue.